What's up everyone, thanks for checking out this video. Today's video is going to be covering a question I get asked a lot, which is about my guitar effects that I use for lo-fi hip hop sounds and how I record my guitar as well. So I've made a guitar rack in Ableton that I'm going to break down individually what effects are being used, so you can recreate it in FL Studios or Live or whatever DAW that you're using. And then for Ableton Live users, you can download the rack for free in the description down below. So I'll be covering what you can tweak within the rack to get your own sound, what everything does, and then at the end, purely for Ableton users, I'll show you how you can make your own guitar effects rack and how you can map everything up to control it automatically with custom setting. I'll be showing you how you can map the macros to control multiple things at the same time. And the rack sounds like this. And really quick before I start too, thanks to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. For those of you who don't know, DistroKid is a music distribution service. That means that they'll take your music and they'll upload it to sites like Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Deezer and all the major streaming platforms, and they take a 0% cut of your royalties, so it's a really great value service. I've talked about them before, they're the distributor that I use and I would really highly recommend them. If you want to try them out, there's a link in the description down below to get 7% off your first year. One great feature about DistroKid that I've been using a lot recently is the hyperfollow feature. So this is effectively a landing page for new music. So as soon as you upload a song to DistroKid, you'll get a hyperfollow page. So fans can pre-save your songs, and you can also customize it to add your own links. You can add your Bandcamp, your YouTube promotion for it, anything you want. It's basically your own custom landing page. The great thing about having the Spotify pre-save feature within the hyperfollow is that the more Spotify pre-saves you get, firstly, fans will hear it straight away as soon as it drops, and secondly, if you're pitching to the Spotify playlists, the more pre-saves you've got, the more chance you've got of getting placed on one of these big playlists, because Spotify knows that people are pre-saving it, they know that people like the music, looking forward to hearing it, so they'll be eager to get your music onto their official playlist, which can get you thousands of views as an independent artist. You can find hyperfollow easily on your DistroKid album page, and it's available for free for anyone who's got a DistroKid plan. So I would highly recommend checking out DistroKid. That's just one of the great things about them. So thanks again for sponsoring this video, and I'll go straight on to the guitar rack. Okay, so split the rack into two different parts. The first part is the amp simulation and a tuner, and the second part is all the effects I'm going to use. If you're recording guitar with mics, then obviously you don't want any amp simulation, or if you've got some other hardware that's doing the amp simulation for you, then you can just turn the dial here on amp sim to 0 as I have, because I'm using my Laney L5 Studio, which has got its own amp and cab simulation. And alternatively I often use Amplitude 4, which is also a great VST for cab and amp simulation. If you're going direct into your PC, then you'll want some amp simulation. With Ableton, they've got their own stock plugins, which are pretty good. They're not the ones that I use personally because I think Amplitude's a bit better, but yeah, they are decent, especially if you've got nothing else at the moment. So I can whack it up to full, and it'll turn on the amp, which is here. So it's simulating a bit of a blues, slightly driven amp. And then the next is the speaker. It's two 12-inch cabs with a near off-axis mic, condenser mic, and it's keeping it in mono, and that's on 100%. So I use that on top of the amp simulation that I've already got. So I'm going to turn this amp sim down to 0, because I'm not going to be using it, but it's there if you need it. And then obviously we've got a tuner as well. Generally we keep that at the start of the rack, because applying things like distortion, saturation and reverb can throw off the tuner at the end of the rack, so you want a tuned guitar coming in. So I've got it there. So that's the first part of it. Nothing too fancy there. If you want me to go into more detail about the actual amp simulation side of things, please do let me know in the comments down below. But this is just going to be more about the effects. That's the first section. The second section is what the rest of these macros do. So the first one is colour. It's a bit of a subjective term in music, but I'm effectively using an EQ to cut some of the high and low as you increase the colour. So if I rack it up, squeezing the sound a bit, cutting the low end, cutting the high end, and a bit of the mids. Just giving it a slightly more muffled sound versus the full bright sound without it. So I usually have that on a little bit. The next thing in the rack is the compressor. So what I'm doing here with the compression is I'm using the sort of gain reduction compression. So all it's doing is taking the loud things, squeezing them down so they're a bit quieter, rather than other types of compressions where you can expand the quiet noise. We're taking the loud sounds and we're reducing the volume. So what I've got here is just a simple fast attack, fast release. So attack is how long it takes for the compression to kick in, and release is how long it takes for it to drop off after the sound. So I've got both of them quite quick. It's usually how I like it. I've got a ratio of about 3 to 1 on the compression, which is how much it compresses the sound when it goes over the band that you're going to set in a second. It's the ratio at which it compresses that sound. And the band is here, it's about minus 20 decibels. That's the threshold at which it starts to kick in, the compression. Under that, nothing will happen. Above that, it'll start to compress the sound. You can see there the gain reduction just peaked in, and that's when the compressor's doing its job because the sound's going over. And then I've got the makeup gain enabled, so that effectively means that the volume coming in is the same as the volume coming out. So when we start to reduce the volume with the compression, the makeup will make that volume up, increase the volume of the whole sound so it matches the same going in. So you're not going to get a really quiet, squished sound. And then finally we've got the dry wet, which is how much of the compression we're mixing into the sound, and that can be controlled here. From completely wet to completely dry. I usually have it on a little bit just to take the edge off the top end. And we're also using RMS compression, which stands for root mean squared. It's effectively sort of an averaged approach to looking at the peaks in the sound versus the peak approach, which is looking at the very top end peaks of the loudness. And it's completely different to expand, which is a different type of compression altogether. I will link the Ableton manual in the description down below as well. So if you want to look in more detail what everything does, it's a really great quick reference tool. And then I've got an auto filter, which is just cutting the very top end. Sometimes when I'm recording, I've got quite a high pitched sort of hiss frequency that I just want to cut off, so I can tweak that according to my input. On this one, it's just a slight high cut, and that's not really been mapped to anything. So if you wanted, you could change the frequency to have more a harsh high cut, but I'm not really using that much on this. Next, we've got the saturation, which is controlled by the drive here. So if you see, if I increase the drive, it increases the drive input and reduces the output, basically meaning that when we increase the drive, we're increasing the volume going in. So we want to match that and reduce the volume going out. It's slightly off, so the drive will increase a bit more than the output volume decreases. So if you go full drive, it's going to be louder than if you go no drive, slightly. And you'll get that much more distorted sound. So saturation adds a lot of sort of harmonic textures to the sound that's coming in. Gives it a slightly distorted, slightly more compressed sound. But yeah, you can control that with the drive. I usually keep it fairly low, but I just want a hint of drive, a hint of distortion in there as well. Next, we've got the filter delay and the convolution reverb. So the convolution reverb is sort of modelled on real life places, on huge, very reverb heavy places. So it's quite an ambient reverb. I've got the K set to about 4 seconds, which is quite long, and I've got the dry wet knob mapped to this dreamy effect. So that dreamy effect is also mapped to the volume of the delays in this filter delay. And what the filter delay is doing is it's just delaying the frequencies in this band here, and this band here. The top band is panned all the way to the left, the bottom all the way to the right, and the middle is centered, which you can tweak on the panning key if you wanted to. But yeah, it adds a bit of space to the mix as well. And then I've got the dry on 100%, so the dry signal is not getting reduced at all. The signal coming in is the same as the signal coming out on the dry side, but it layers in this delay. So the more dreamy it is, the more delay and the more reverb heavy you've got there. So it is quite subtle, which is how I like it. It's not a heavy delay, it's just a ambient sort of delay for when I'm layering in some ambient guitar onto a track. I can crank that right up and get this nice sort of tone for the top end. So you can mess with these frequencies as well if you want it to be more of a full delay, covering the lower spectrum of the frequency bands as well, but I just keep it on the high end for now. So as I say, the dreamy is controlling the volume there and the dry wet on the reverb. I've then got this dark hole reverb, which I've put quite a heavy high cut on, and this is the sort of standard reverb that I'd use when I'm recording some rhythm. It's not as ambient, and the decay time's a little bit shorter, as you can see there, and that's actually mapped to decay here, so you can increase the decay time if you wanted to, but usually I keep it quite low, sort of around 700 milliseconds when doing rhythm stuff. And then the dry wet on that is mapped from about 65%, which is the most I'd use with this reverb. So I keep it sort of 40 to 50 is generally where I'm at when I'm recording more sort of rhythm. That sort of thing. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. In Ableton you can change the quality of the reverb from eco to high. Eco takes up less compute resources, but it's quite a lightweight plugin anyway, so most modern computers shouldn't have a problem having it on high, which is why you should keep it for the most part. It's got quite a large size, quite a large stereo field to it. It's got a bit of a high cut here and fairly high pre-delay. But yeah, I quite like the sound of this one, and I'm using it quite a lot on a lot of my plugins. Finally, I've got a chorus, which is again controlled here. Just a bog standard chorus in Ableton. Yeah, not much to say about that really. It's just a preset that I use occasionally for that sort of more warped effect. And then lastly, the limiter, which is probably not usually needed, but it's just in case it starts to clip towards the end, the limiter will catch that. But generally, if you set the volumes right, you shouldn't need it, but it's there just in case. So that's the full rack. If you want to know how to make your own, I'm going to talk about that now. So let's say we want a reverb and a overdrive. What you can do is you can press Shift, click on both effects, and if you right click, you can group them together, which is Command and G on a Mac. And then as soon as you do that, you get this macro rack, this effect rack. What you can do there is you can right click on any sort of dial within the effect and you can map it to macro 1. And you can do the same with another effect. You can be mapped to a different one or the same one. So I map it to macro 1 again. Now this controls the drive and the decay time. Then what I can do is I can edit the macro map by right clicking on the effect that I've just mapped. And I can change here what the min value is. So I can crank that up and I can crank up the distort min. And I can go from 36 to 100%, or I can go from 36 down to 0. So now if I cancel this by pressing escape, 0 on here is 36 on the drive, 1.7 on the reverb, and 100% it goes up to 60 on the reverb and 0 on the drive. So you can have a sort of inverse relationship with the two. And you can also map the on-off to a macro, so a reverb off and on is wrapped to macro 2. And then if I again go in and edit the macro map, I can change this min to 1. Now what that does is the device will be on as soon as it's on anything above 1. When it gets to 1, when it gets to 0, it turns off. So it's great if you want it to be off until you start triggering it, or you're going to start turning on the reverb and you don't want the distortion to come on. You can make the distortion kick in at like 40. And there's a lot you can do with it, so it's a really great tool to customise and make your own racks. And it's good spending time doing that now, so when you're in the middle of a track you can just drop it in and you've got this pre-made rack that does exactly what you want it to do, and it's really easy to tweak because you've made it yourself. So yeah, that's pretty much this video done. Thanks for watching. You can download the rack for free in the description down below. Please do comment, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, because it really helps the channel grow. But yeah, see you next time.